Hello, this is Debbie Spencer, and today I'm going to show you two projects. One is a traveler's notebook of one signature, and the other is an upcycled, genuine Victorian photo album, which can be made into a art book or, as I'll show you, can be made into a junk journal as well. As I told you in a couple of my previous videos, I've been getting the subscription box monthly from Paper Garden, which is a company in Finland. And the box that I get always sends a journal that's already put together for you. In this case, it's one that kind of features violets and pansies and purples and deep green tones and so on. And so I played up to that by making my own closure from an embellishment on a purse, I think it was, a child's purse, and then I attached that to a piece of hair elastic. In order to cover the white borders, I use some sort of trim, in this case velvet ribbon, and I strengthen the spine with some sort of lace. And then on the back I do some color. In this case I did stencils, Tim Holtz stencils, and attached a colorful vellum flower. I wanted the theme of this book to be quiet time activities such as reading, having tea, relaxing at home. And so I started out the book theme by taking some pages from a vintage copy of Andersen's Fairy Tales, both the colorful front piece and a page which, since the quotes were already on the paper, I punched out a scallop shape, covered it with some aged, yellowed vellum, and then added some little embellishments around. I get my beautiful sari fabrics from Sheila Gingrich at Boho Daydreams. It is a junk journaling community on Facebook, which you might want to check out. And some of them I order from other places, but I've got quite a collection, and they add a beautiful textile and visual interest to my pages. I don't really have anything in it, but here's a tuck spot, and I've featured not only a vintage trade card, but a sewing applique, a postage stamp, and then some paper crafting charms and flowers, along with some tickets and washi tape. This spread starts with this gold swirled marbleized handmade paper, and I have used some vintage trade cards and calling cards with the Tim Holtz flashcards, each with a quote, a book page, and again punched out the space so that the quote shows through. This one from Emily of New Moon. To carry through the theme of teas, this was the image I got in the box with the word hope, but I used some fragments from a vintage book on hot chocolate, added some tags. This one is kind of a really pretty bluish and purplish shape from a coffee cup. And this one was a gift card that I just kind of punched out. And then I use a lot of these washi stickers, which are translucent, and you can get them on a company called Wish that imports a lot of things from Asia. I thought the lace was pretty enough, the vintage lace, to just kind of stand on its own. So each one has a vintage postcard of various violet-covered flowers. I've got some patterned purple seam binding, and this is a stamped image I made as a make and take at a conference I went to. These are great because you actually have stamps in the shapes of coffee pots and grass and flowers, and you can just kind of compose what looks like a watercolor image. And I like to use a lot of fragments from vintage pieces for my tags, more of the washi stickers, and then just ordinary gauze that you get at the store from the first aid department as kind of a raggedy background with some roses. Here there's just some tags from a collection. I don't remember the name of what it's called. Any rate, these stickers look like lace. Paper Gardens likes to use an image and then a piece of lace with one of these little pins that has a bead and a tag or something like that hanging from it. And then she gives you some of these matching images with the theme of the book, and you can just kind of combine those with other things you have. In this case, lace and postcards, another Wish branded washi sticker. I think I got these tool pieces with the beautiful embroidered and embellished with gold threads pieces from Joann's, I believe. And it's got kind of a craft doily from Michael's, along with a card from a game called Authors, but it's an antique version of that, and another hanging charm. I bought a book mainly for its pages because just probably 150 pages of this rich, thick ivory paper that's framed in this gold and violet lattice design. So I know I'll use that for a lot, and probably also sell them at my Etsy shop, Altered Art Treasures. Again, with a postcard and a piece of sari fabric. A piece of a seed catalog and another washi sticker with the same paper that I kind of cut and framed with washi tape in order to fit in this size journal. I think this was a greeting card, the Marie Antoinette with the wings, and I found some really cool peacock appliques in a burgundy color, and some of these really cute butterflies from Michael's. The theme of tea again with a rub-on and a stamped card in this pocket, a sewing applique. And I use a lot of the wrinkled, crinkled seam binding, as well as little ribbons that I like to snake around my page. I probably have some in another part of the book. When I don't like a project, I put it in a box, I rip it out, and I use it oftentimes in another project. So that's what happened here. And to give the eye a little bit of a break from the purple, I kind of went with a more neutral tone. Small bag with some stickers and lots of quotes. The Paper Garden journals come with a collection of vintage papers, usually in Finnish, sometimes in German, but I enhance it with quotes and poems from many of the vintage books that I myself collect. And tuck spots are pretty traditional in this piece. Just kind of glue down a postcard and leave parts of it open. I like to use unconventional materials. In this case, these are Hershey candy wrappers from Easter, I guess, and I just kind of used parts of those with some buttons on top. more vintage pieces, more buttons, and a little hang tassel charm. Another break from the purple. I love these pieces. I found some grocery lists that I think were from the early 1800s, and I've used pieces of them judiciously because I want to use them all in one project. But with some of the yellowed sales tag pieces and some photographs and washi stickers, it's a simple page that looks richer because of the old ephemera that I used. This has got shades of silver and gold. This really pretty garland is one of the rubber stamps that comes in the boxes. I have many of these from the boxes I've received, and I don't know which one goes with which box. And the little word stamps are cool. They come from a company called Red Lead Paper Crafting, I believe, but it's a St. Louis company that's got a website, and they do their own rubber stamps, including these little words. I kind of like the idea of this little girl making her size look small because of the scale of the stamps I chose. In this case, some thistles, the washi tape daisies, and a dragonfly, and the butterflies on top of the vintage finish papers that come with the box. And the last spread is kind of darker. I really like this greeting card with this vintage-y looking orchid design that seemed to go well with the postcards. And as a pocket, I'm using a transparency, which came from a scrapbooking collection. Some more of these velvet violets from the same piece that my closure came from. And that's the first project that I wanted to show you. The second one is a project that I made from 2012, long before I had heard about junk journaling, and I've often thought about what I would do today. I can kind of explain how when I use this beautiful medium that I love so much of these Victorian photo albums that I upcycle, they can be made into gorgeous junk journals, and they're especially nice for someone like myself who really doesn't know how to do bookbinding techniques, or I'm just learning. These albums come in a variety of shapes and materials. This one was just gorgeous. This yellow rose is on a material called celluloid, which was a precursor of plastic. And you can see that from the spine that this was supposed to be a rich velvet in the beginning. Now, of course, it's very weathered, but I've kind of left it that way because I think it gives kind of a nod to the age of the piece. And oftentimes when I buy these, they do have working brass hardware, and if they do, I like to kind of keep that intact. And sometimes what I need to do is to remove some of the pages from the inside so that the book will still close. I decided to use the original page that says album, but I added the words fashion and beauty album. That's my theme, and it opened me up to using there's some really pretty papers from a collection by my mind's eye that had these glitter elements. I bought extras because I just love the papers, even though they're older. Some vintage pieces, and then of course more of the crinkled seam binding. You can get these brass pieces, brass pressed pieces at antique stores and flea markets. And I pick those up too because a lot of times I'll use that to put a ribbon closure. And then I used some combination of velvet flowers and little violet or pansies that I had in my stash. The yellow and pink is kind of dictated by this, I believe it's a reproduction, but this is from the Godey's Ladies book of dress patterns from 1851. And I used some upholstery trims, some of these really nice pink and white beaded appliques, and a lot of vintage calling cards and trade cards die cuts. I like to put little pieces that dangle from the bottom as well. Here you can see that I have a piece of it's gotten kind of dark. I need to put on some light. A piece of duct tape, which I used to kind of reassemble the page when I removed a page behind it, so that the book would be able to close. And I love this kid glove. It's vintage. I don't know who wore that. It looks like a child's glove, but it's real. Along with a dress applique, kind of sequined, and some ads for corsets from an old fashion catalog, lingerie guards. And then on this side we have a lady with a hat, a few of the vintage buckles, shoe buckles and belt buckles, and then a plume from a hat. You can kind of see how I have these little charms that dangle from the bottom, kind of coordinate with the pages. Here's where I use some of the thinner ribbon to kind of snake around, and more of the little brass pressed pieces. Some embellishments with rhinestones or pearls in this case. Old stamps. Some game cards that have a real nice patina to them. You can buy labels at like a stationery store and make faux button cards with flat beads or what have you. With fashion and beauty, I kind of like the idea of doing a spread just on hair, and that's what I've done here. Several vintage trade cards with hair images, modern hair ornaments, a vintage comb that's kind of been prettied up with some little pearlized flowers, a little beaded dangle, perfume bottle, and so on. More of the glitter paper collection from my mind's eye, and ads from magazines of the time. I love this hairpiece. And then just some magnetized words. I really like texture and the fact that you can touch and explore what I have put here. The books are meant to be touched as well as looked at. This is more of a sewing page. You can see that when these antique albums, when these albums were created, there's old paper that's usually in very bad condition, and it's crumbly. You can remove it, but usually the cardboard is in great shape. So what you end up with when you take that paper off is a kind of a see-through panel that you can back with a double-sided paper, and it makes a niche for embellishments that are a little thicker, like the buttons or the snaps. I've got some pieces from Singer Sewing Machine book, and buttons, another hanging charm, and this beautiful piece of needlework, petty point, a little spray of roses that I thought really matched the scrapbook paper I used. A little darker palette here. I usually pick a scrapbook paper and one major image to kind of dictate my color palette. And then I have a lot of my embellishments organized by color and by category so I can find what I need. These flowers I made from a vintage handkerchief. I just kind of cut it into strips and then used thread to make a rosette, and it worked out really well with the little tatted edge. I've got 2 cards of vintage buttons, stamps, a sleeve for a seam binding package, and a little set of needles, and more of the crinkled seam binding that snakes around the page. Now we've gone with red and black. I've got some metal letters and little pieces of a ruler, some charms, but these are all vintage pieces. The little girl in the boater hat, this kind of military looking bead, and gold thread applique, some pins from a vintage roll of pins, and needle sleeve. I used these metal words. I don't know where I got them, but this one says crimson, and the other one, I don't know what it says. Beautiful. This is cool because this shows how, if this were made today, I could certainly make it into a junk journal, because this is from an old card of mending floss, and so I just make it into a flap, and you could easily put your journaling cards here, or you could take an element like that and leave it so that you could slip some cards in or from the side. Even now, when I create a journal, since I don't like my handwriting, I tend to make lots of tuck spots and tags so that my journaling is not right out in the open, distracting from the composition of the page. I let the advertising piece kind of dictate this spread. You don't, but everyone else does. Look at your hair. And I've got a lady with a hat. This is called a carte de visite, which is kind of the size of photograph that was popular to exchange among friends. The larger size were called cabinet cards, and I have a lot of those as well in my collection. But the featured piece on this page is this very elegant spray of feathers, which would have been used on a hat. And then I used some dressmaking trims and flowers, a few more vintage pieces offset by an ad with an address for Bon Marché, buying your millinery goods, your hat making trims, and so on. And another dangling charm piece. In the final spread, I started out with a few little cherubs, this one for a shoe company, and then this one for cologne, along with a vintage photograph, some game cards, ads, stamps. This is metal trim, metallic trim, finishing off with a really nicely aged coupon and more of the My Mind's Eye glittered papers and some roses. So this is a piece that I really like. As I said, I made it in 2012. The ones I make now, because I still use this is one of my favorite mediums, and I make both fully dressed and partially dressed albums to sell. My Etsy store is Altered Art Treasures, but I also love communicating with people one-on-one, so I can come up with exactly what you're looking for in terms of a selection of vintage paper, trims, trade cards, and so on, in your choice of colors and themes. So check out my Etsy store and contact me through Instagram, or just, through a comment, and if you would like to see what I have that might really beautify your own projects. Thanks for watching.